Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, Mike and John with Coffee and the Bull. We want to say thank y'all for taking a moment out of your day and watching this episode. Just out of the ordinary disclaimer that we've got going on, we do have a dog walking around. His name is Doc. So if you hear random noises or whatever, I can't help it. That's the dog. So, to get on the topic, today we're going to be talking about I'm fine, I'm just broken. Yep. Is the name of the episode. And so we're going to follow that with the typical disclaimer. We're going to touch kind of some tough areas. It's going to be kind of dark, not super dark, but if you are not in the headspace for that, obviously, if you've got thoughts, that of self-harm and things like that, don't listen to the podcast right now. Instead, go ahead, call 988, try to get you some medical help. Or some mental help that way. We're not doctors, we're not professionals. We're just two jackasses with microphones and trying to make some type of difference somewhere. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and kind of jump into it. And we're going to be talking about I think every guy goes through this, and we go through it in silence. We don't talk about it to everybody. Right. We don't call a friend and say, "Hey man, this is what I got going on." You don't talk to your wife about it. I don't think once I've ever told my wife kind of where I was with it, even though right. There was days where I was like, I want to, but then it's like, nah, because you also don't want the pity party that goes with it. But right. there were times that you were just down, and I say down, you're not sad, you're not just feeling. I don't even think it's depressed. I may be wrong on that, but it's just you feel so disconnected from everything.
Yeah, it's like you're lost. You're trying to figure out why you don't know where you're going. You don't know which way's up. You're kind of stuck in the in-between, as I call it, where right. It's like, I don't know what's wrong. Like, nothing's really wrong. Everything's going on track. There's right. no, crisis here. There's nothing for me to jump to and save the day. But you just don't feel right. Like, you right. just, you battle it.
For me, what it is, I run into I notice there's times where it's like, I feel sad, but I'm also not sad at the same time. Like, I'm not going crying or anything like right, that. Right. If I wanted to, I couldn't. But it's music doesn't sound is exciting or whatever, despite whatever genre you go into.
Right.
You could have upbeat trap music going on. You're just like whatever.
Yeah.
You're just kind of chilling out. Food's not all exciting. You don't really care what you're eating or whatever. And
you go in the less world.
Say that again.
The less world, where everything is colorless, tasteless.
I could see
less.
I don't know if that's a scientific term, but I could see that.
No, I just came up with that. It was on me.
Well, yeah.
Copyright that.
Yeah, it's not going to be,
the
psychology
new
101 at college. But yeah, it's just, for lack of a better term, you just kind of hit cruise control. You're just getting up in the morning, you're going to work, you're getting home from work, you take a shower, go to the bathroom, get something to eat, and you go to bed, get up, turn around, do it the next day, get the kids to school, whatever. But what I found, and I know I'm not the only one because we've talked about it. And I've talked, other people that have talked about it. It's a common thing, where you feel unambitious.
Right.
You're not excited about anything. Things that you should be happy about, you don't really care about. Things you should be sad about, you still don't really care about. Things you should be angry, you just reach that moment where, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I've heard it on TikTok, or other social media platforms where it's like, the most dangerous spot a guy can be in is when he's saying, it is what it is. And at first I was like, nah, y'all just saying stuff to make sense or to make views or whatever. But I can understand that to a degree,
right. Because
he's scratching right now.
He's got big ears.
Yeah.
It's I don't think it's a danger to society or the world around you. I think it's a danger to yourself. That's when
you're just
going
dangerous.
Yeah. Because I got out of it not that long ago, and I say got out of it, I'm just peaking that point where it's like we're expected to provide. That's all we're expected to do. We're expected to get up, go to work, come home, fix the boo-boos and move on. And and that's where the episode's at today. The coffee pot's grilling, the dog wants coffee. This is Doc, by the way. Go back and lay down, buddy. And so we have these roles that, bro.
He's hungry.
even the dog is like, what is that thing doing? We have these roles that they expect us to fulfill, whether it's, change the oil in the car, Mike in this coffee pots. Change the oil in the car, or fix this on the house.
Take the garbage out.
Right, remodel this, and kids got hurt or kids sick or whatever. And I think for us, we hit that lull in life where we realize that, for lack of better terms, we've kind of peaked. We've hit the autopilot cap where it's like, okay, all that's required of me is to get up, go to work, bring home a steady paycheck, and fix the windows, take the trash out, and put a Band-Aid on it and call it a good day. And we get into that role of, like, my dad was notorious for the go ask your mother or go tell your mom when I was hurt or sick or whatever. Not that he didn't care, it's just it wasn't on his list to do. Bro, you cannot have coffee. That's the last thing you're going to get.
So I think that we hit the roles, but also kind of one of the conversations we had the other day, and to throw this out, like we talked about, this isn't scripted. Like, we have conversations throughout the week on what we want to talk about for the episode, and then it just kind of it happens, which is why you get times where it's spontaneous. You get times where it seems like we know what we're talking about, or we had an idea. That's all it is we talk about it throughout the week, and we sit down and shebang it out.
Well, I know the way I do it. I don't know what process you go through for our conversations, but typically, we spitball our ideas and we discuss, like, hey, this topic, whatever. And usually we'll find a topic that we both are like, oh, that's good. Right. That's a solid one. That's one I can relate to. And we navigate, in the podcast, but in the time building up to the podcast, whether it's a day, whether it's a week, I take myself and I get myself into that headspace. And so, like, this last week, I've been emotionally up and down because it's like I'm trying to get myself mentally in that headspace to articulate the feelings and the emotions and the way we go through it. And it's like you said, it's not a scripted thing. It's going back in your life and trying to dial in on each time that these things happen. And that's where, we kind of came up with the fact that it's not a one-time thing. It's throughout your life, your emotional state and the mentality that we have gets tied into these lulls where it's like, what's next? Where do we go from here? And, we tie it into the changes in our life. So, when you're a married person and you got, okay, I got to make the wife satisfied, I got to satisfy the kids, the bill collector, this. As long as I'm checking these boxes, I'm good. And then when you realize that's all you're doing, right? You don't have a separate outlet, and like for me, the podcast has been my change in the matrix, if you will, to give me not so much a motivation, but in reality, it's what it is. It's a drive. It's a, I want to get the best microphone so that I give the best audio. I want to make sure I've got a good camera and good computers and everything else because I want to make a change somewhere. I want to help somebody. And I know we've talked about this, and this is kind of on topic, off topic, but one of the reasons that I wanted to be in law enforcement is I wanted to help people. It's you can sit at home all day and complain about things. You can get in there and get your hands dirty, make a difference. And that's why this podcast is my drive, because I want to change somebody. I like getting the messages, and we've gotten a handful of them of, hey, I've been there since day one, listen to every episode, and it feels good not to be alone. And that's one of the things that we as men do. We constantly seclude ourselves from our outside resources that are there to, hey man, what's wrong? Or how you doing? You okay? Right. And we shut it down. And I know you'd said something about that earlier, where it's like, that's your door, that's your opening, that's life's kicking you, you're down. This is somebody reaching a hand out, and we discuss about our spouses or significant others or dating partners or whatever. and this was something that so I'm that guy. When you say something is a fact, I'm gonna Google it, I'm gonna research it, and I'm gonna see just how right you are and how wrong I could be. And so one of the experiments that I tested out with this is, I talked to a lot of people, men, women, everything. And so one of the things I did was I started dropping hints and then direct messages of like talking to different men and women and saying things of not in-depth emotional state, but basically kind of hinting around that I'm not okay. And just seeing what the reaction was. And most of my guy friends were like, you'll be all right. You'll get through it.
Right.
And that's the end of it, and most of the females, whether they were friends or whether they, were potential whatevers, it was always a, oh, well, that's terrible. Let me tell you about work.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so we're just going to mull over that I'm lightly coding this, and I'm going to go, so that's what changed my mindset. It would be like, okay, instead of a hint, let me just directly say, this is exactly where I'm at mentally.
Right.
And so that was probably the biggest kick in the teeth was, and I'm wearing them so I can say it, kick in the teeth, get it.
I got it.
He didn't get it. So direct message to somebody basically kind of conveying my mental, emotional state. Like, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm not okay. This is your significance to me, and this is why I value you, or this is why, I want you in my life. And it was like almost either immediate silence where like, I can tell right now I haven't gotten a message back.
Right.
Or if there was an immediate message back, it was, man, I'm really sorry, that sucks. And then it was just move on to whatever topic that they were wanting to cover because they didn't want to go down that road. And it's like, we're not accepted
Right.
when we open up that emotional gate to be like, hey, come in, let me give you what's going on in my world. Let me ask you for help without directly saying help.
Right.
And that's the struggle that we have. And it's taken me 39 years to find somebody that, could you get any smaller, buddy? Like the loudest get comfortable dog in the world.
Well, so I think what I run into is when I look back, I think the first time I've been in a situation where I kind of felt like, I was disconnected from the world, even though I was just kind of floating in it.
Right.
Is when I was going through I was in college, and I was working night shifts at a distribution center, a warehouse locally, and so I'd work at night, get in from work, sometimes go home, sometimes go sleep in the parking lot to get ready for class, depending on how late I got off work or whatever.
Right.
And then turn around and go do it again. And I got married in the mix of it, and so go home, try to spend a little bit of time with her, and then go back to class, go back to work. So I could tell you 6 months in advance what my schedule was because it was so packed, and there was no time to, hey, let's go catch a round of golf or let's go fishing or whatever. Like there wasn't a lot of time for
no
that.
reprieve.
And so I caught myself. That was the first time I ever really felt like I was depressed.
Right.
Where I wasn't connected to anything, and I don't really remember what got me out of it. I think maybe hanging out with some friends at some point, but I don't really remember because I wasn't paying attention to it at the time. It was just like, all right, it's a bad series of weeks or whatever, and it wound up being a couple months. And I remember because several people were like, hey man, well, you seem like you're mad, or you seem like something's going on. What's going on? And I would explain it to them, and kind of like you said, it just kind of got brushed off. Oh, you'll be all right or whatever, and kind of go about business. But now that I'm a little bit older and I look at it with a little bit different set of lenses, I have the days where it's like, you just don't want to get up out of bed. If you do get out of bed, you can't wait to get back in because you're just tired. You're not sleeping right.
Well, you could sleep for 12, 14, 16
right.
hours.
It still wouldn't make a difference.
Right.
You're exhausted, or whatever, and then you go to work and you don't have the same drive that you had whenever you used to. You'd be excited to get to work, and all the older cats, who were working already, you're like, why are y'all so grumpy or whatever? Well, now you're the old grumpy guy. You're
right.
like, well, when did this happen? But you get where you're driving home, and none of it seems to make you're not comfortable, but
Right.
you don't really know, and that's where like we had the conversation. I'm like, man, I feel broken,
Yeah.
and feel broken, feel numb, you just feel disconnected. You're at kind of like an outer body thing where you're just on a autopilot setting or
Yeah.
whatever, and you know what I found was I was going home and my son would climb up in my lap to watch TV or whatever, and that's a moment I should be cherishing or whatever. And I'm just kind of vegging out with him watching TV. I
Right.
got to he doesn't realize he enjoys hopping in my lap and watching TV in the recliner with me, but I don't think he realizes how much more I enjoy it typically.
Right.
And there was days where it's like, hey, I'm not. This isn't even all. Like I'd rather just go to sleep, and that's not really where anybody wants to be. You only have so much time on this earth, and so you don't want to take and spend it, just zoned out all the time
Yeah.
or whatever. And so I think the way that we can help out with that, 'cause one thing that aggravates me, and so we're taking a little trip around a mountain, right? One thing that aggravates me with my wife, and this is not just me, this is not just Mike with his wife scenario. This is typically husbands with their wives scenario,
Yeah.
or boyfriends with their girlfriends. Is guys speak very directly for the most part. Females tend to drop hints because they don't want to come off as nagging or
Right. Right.
or
Demanding
complaining
or
whatever.
needy or
and
whatever.
so
the
and so
case
they'll
may
drop
be.
hints, and because we're great detectives, we miss every single one of those hints,
Yes.
because somehow it's, I don't know, I'm not going to say anything because she might be mad at me when
The
she
one
listens to
time
this,
she listens.
so
Showing up
but
next
but
week
we
with a
all know
black
what
eye.
typically women will say something and what they're saying is not exactly what they mean at the time,
Right.
and that causes probably a majority of the fights that I've got in my marriage or whatever, where it's like, hey, why if you wanted this, why didn't you say this? Or why didn't you just come out directly and say it or
Right.
whatever? Because then I know, hey, take the trash out right now, because hey, you stuck something stinky in it or whatever, and whatever. But you run into those instances, and those causes points of conflict
Right.
in your relationships. So when we go together, or when guys meet up, hey man, how's it going? Oh, I'm good, or I'm fine, or whatever. We're doing the exact same thing
Right.
because we're not fine. We don't
Right.
give direct answers, and then we want to turn around and play the victim and say, where oh, nobody cares about me. No, they asked you, and you didn't give them an answer to make them want to dive deeper. Now, granted, they may not, but you don't know because you didn't give them the opportunity
What
to.
if it's a schedule thing? And
What do you mean?
what I mean by that is, so we generally speaking, we kind of know, okay, I know that my vehicle can go this many miles before I got to change the oil. I know that the things in your life are scheduled. Like I know that if I don't have the trash out by Monday night, it's like pick it up, getting picked up Tuesday. We have in our brains this time frame, right? And I know
Okay.
you do this. I know you do this because we've had this conversation where we time out our day, where it's like I know that if I make it home by this time,
Right.
and I'm
Get this much sleep before work.
right, I'm good to go. That's how our brains process things, and I say it generally because I can't say that every man thinks that way, but I can say every man that I've ever come across puts that thought process into perspective that way.
How long is it going to take to get to work?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And knowing like if I leave a minute past this, I'm catching every bit of traffic the whole way there, so I've got to be out the door by this time, right? So, what if in those moments, right? So, when you call me on your way into work, because I go in an hour early, you call me on your way into work. We don't have those conversations. It's very like a
Right.
hey, I'm awake, and in reality, it's more of a you're not necessarily checking in, but you're letting me know I don't have to come to the house and wake you up or anything
Right,
like that.
right.
Like, never had to, but that's basically all it is. Just, hey, I'm up, I'm on my way in. And I know this. If you were to ask me in that moment, you all right? You sound funny. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. Because I know, number one, I know you just woke up. You ain't been awake but maybe 30 minutes tops, at best. And we're not we've been awake 30 minutes, let's have conversation. That's not us. In the same breath, later in that shift, if we were to park up somewhere and you're like, you good? I know time-wise, schedule-wise, that's the time for that conversation because we don't have anything going on. And like I was saying earlier, it's taken 39 years to find somebody that I can unload some of the things that have weighed me down my whole life that I've never been able to get out, because a relationship isn't something that you just have instantly. You don't just meet some guy at a local pub or bowling alley. I don't know why that seems to be a theme lately, bowling. But you don't just meet somebody and go, let me tell you all my dark secrets. Let me tell you what eats at me at night.
No, and I get that, but I'm talking about more of when you meet up with friends, and it could be, hey, you're chilling out right for a football game or whatever.
Right,
You're
and
hanging
I'm
out,
sorry,
hanging out at somebody's house.
That's
Like,
where my derail went.
I understand that. Hey, if we're sitting at the time clock, about ready to swipe our badges to clock in or whatever, and we're surrounded by 15 other people, that's not the time to get everything off your chest. So I understand that, but even amongst, when you do have, hey, your friends that's, been in your pocket for, 5, 6, 7 years,
Right.
Who, you should be able to be vulnerable with them, but we don't. And then we want to complain that nobody, ever listens to us, or nobody ever checks in on us. No, they do. You don't give them a chance to eat.
Right. Well, part of it, I think it falls back on us as that stigma, that BS toxic masculinity theme that goes around, that we're not meant to be a burden. We're just meant to provide. And at the same time, it ties back to that other episode that we talked about, your image. You don't want people to see that you're not in this great condition, And I was thinking about this the other day, where it's like, I think honestly, you and maybe 1, 2 other people tops have ever seen me have moments of not being here and was down here, and I needed help, whether it was emotionally, financially, whatever. But on the outside looking in, everybody just sees me as this single dad.
Right.
I'm a veteran. I'm taking care of this house, and I've got a nice vehicle, and I'm he's doing okay. That's how we look at it. Nobody ever takes the time to go, is he really doing okay? Bill Gates, he's a billionaire, right? Is he still alive? Who am I thinking of? Who's the dead guy?
Alive.
Steve Jobs. That's who I'm thinking of. You look at these guys who have all that money, right? They hire all these people to take care of it, and the reality that for me sinks in, what makes us all connected is that Bill Gates goes bankrupt tomorrow. Now he's the biggest loser in the world. How's he providing for his responsibilities? I say responsibilities because I have no idea if that dude's married or has kids or whatever. But nobody ever checks past the on the outside looking in.
Right. Right.
You do the soft knock on the door.
Outward standing.
Right. You soft knock on the door, like, hey, how you doing? You okay? You don't sound all right. You look mad. Everything good? Yeah, I'm okay. All right, well, I'm going down the street. And then that's I think our problem is that we don't know when to pry and when not to pry. We always ask at the wrong time. And I don't know if that's a subconscious thing or if that's an intentional, like, I'm going to ask right before the game starts or right before we're going to go play laser tag, because let's be real, you and I are probably going to play laser tag before we watch sports together. Yeah. But you ask in that moment when that's not the ideal time. It's a two-part thing where it's or two-way street, as they say, because we're asking at times that really aren't the best time, because I think on the asking part, you're saying the door's here, walk through it. But the other side of it is we're not looking at I'm telling you the door's open, but now's not the time you're going to want to walk through it. In that same breath, on that other side, you're like, I don't want to be a burden. And two, I don't want you to look at my standing in what I believe you see me as and see me down here and know that even though on the outside it looks like a glass house, on the inside I'm throwing stones at every wall in this thing, and that's where I run into in my world, where it's like I've made my image, I've made my picture, if you will, on who I am and what I've accomplished and where I am in life, and I'll be damned if anybody's going to look negatively on that, and
I think
pride.
I think that's what a lot of guys do, and that's whether, hey, like I've got friends that are, they're certified weld inspectors, whatever, and they'll get this classification, that one, or this award, that award, whatever. Same thing, with honestly any profession out there is you have your baselines, and then you could always advance. And obviously,
Right.
nobody hops in and says, I would like to be entry level for the rest of my career.
Right,
You know,
right.
and so as you get the next notch in your belt, you put that you look at departmental emails, right? We
Right.
get them all the time, and this is not just a law enforcement thing, but it's every job I've ever worked where I've got an email. It's they'll have their signature line is their name and then their title, and then I've had
Every
every single
certification
certificate
underneath it.
thing that
Right,
they've
right.
ever done. It's like okay, you're putting a lot in your name.
Right.
To me, it bolsters a lack of confidence versus confidence. But it's like you want everybody to look at you and see all the accomplishments you've
Right.
made. But at the same time, I know a lot of guys. I'm one of them, and so I kind of you attract people similar to yourself. But I've noticed a lot of guys. You can see this on Facebook when they go to get awards at work or different things or whatever. You don't see a lot of them smiling. Some of them will be smiling, depending on what the award is. But I know I don't like being in the spotlight.
Right.
Like I was talking to one of our coworkers the other day. I don't like being in the spotlight. I don't like getting awards. I don't like
Yeah.
attention being on me. I had that part of my life. I'm not really looking for that anymore. Wasn't always like that though.
Right.
I don't like when I have to stand in front of people. I can stand in front of people and teach. Like I've done that before, or talk about different things in front of people. But I don't like standing there, everybody's eyes on me, and me just being congratulated for doing a good job.
Right.
I don't know why. I know I'm not the only one who's like that. But it's one of those things where it's like you start looking at why you're like that.
Telemarketer.
Interesting.
I don't know anybody in Odessa,
Interesting.
Illinois, so.
But I remember as a kid, I was a bit of a nerd in school. And I say a bit of a nerd,
Still
I was
are.
definitely a nerd. And I'm not talking about the computer whiz nerd. I'm talking about the nerd.
Dungeons and Dragons.
No, it wasn't like
You were quick on that. You're like, no.
I never played Dungeons and Dragons, believe it or not. But it was I focused on having really good grades. I was stressed out, because
Right.
at the time, it was they taught, hey, if you're going to ever be a success, you have to go to college. You got to get a
Right,
degree.
right.
You got to go to the best college. You got to do this and do that. So it's like I had focused on. I was like, all right, I want to go do this, and I think I want to be like an aeronautical engineer or whatever.
Right.
Missed it by that much,
What?
Yeah, I wanted that when I was in high school.
Hold on. How
my
much
goal-
did you miss it by?
The very first college class I had, I changed my major because I was like, I can't do this. Week one, I was like, this chemistry, college chemistry is what did it for me. But back on track, in high school, going up every year you get awards, whether it's Beta Club, Honor Roll, this achievement thing or
I
whatever.
want you to know I have no idea
think
what
that
any of these awards
they make
are.
up a bunch of them, and even in graduation, like I walked out with plaques and all kinds of stuff, and that was a moment where, hey, I had the cheese eating grin, walking across the stage, chest poked out. I was a lot smaller then, so it was a lot smaller
I'm
chest.
seeing the pictures you
But
were.
walk across and I wanted that moment to shine, right?
Right.
But in front of me, I had graduation ceremony. I had college coming up, college graduation. Getting into the job, getting promoted at the job, and all this other stuff. So I had milestones set in the future. Well, now I'm in mid 30s or late 30s, and I'm looking at there's not a lot of milestones up ahead.
Right.
I'm in the career that I want to be in. I've done a lot in this career. I've done other things to know that, hey, this is where I want to be. I've got a successful marriage. My kids are doing good. So it's like I don't have a lot that I'm looking forward to, as far as maybe retirement or whatever. But it's you don't want to. I think that it's what leads into like the midlife crisis or something
Right.
like that. Where you're kind of on autopilot. So now, when you get told, hey, you're receiving an award or whatever, you're like, okay, I'm receiving an award for doing my job.
Yeah.
It's not. For me, it wasn't all that exciting. That being said, kind of like we talked about, you're expected for like we're taught, hey, you're expected to do your job. So you do your job. Why are you rewarding me for doing what I'm supposed to be doing in the first place?
Yeah.
Whereas if we take and we link up with your friend at work who does bass fishing tournaments, we don't know anything about bass fishing. Like I know how to throw, how to cast.
Yeah.
I don't know how to throw a bait caster, but I throw a fishing pole in there. Hit the button. Watch the cork. That's all I'm doing. Like I'm a basic level fisherman.
It's funny you say push the button, because the last time I went fishing, which was decades and decades,
it was
I mean
a push
decades,
button, wasn't it?
It was always 100% a push button, and
So
somebody made
I'll
fun
do
of
the
me.
open top ones or whatever. I like those more, but I know right now
Somebody-
send it out, and I'm gonna try to bass fish with a cord. That's a level bass fish from that.
So somebody made fun of me because they were like, "Oh, you're using that push
Right.
button." I was like, first off, you think that I know anything about fishing?
Right.
I don't know nothing.
But if we were to go do a bass fishing tournament or whatever, and we won, we come in 5th place. I don't care. Look,
Right.
we're gonna be walking
I'm gonna
across
have the
there. I'm gonna be
biggest
strutting
grin.
like a turkey,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
field, just acting a fool.
Right.
Why is that? It's still an award,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's not something that was expected of you. Like you would have worked for it. Whatever. Maybe
I think
learn
it's-
how fish swim in water. I don't know.
I think it's an above and beyond. Like we were talking about earlier, if I were to do it, to word it properly, and when I was in the military, the one thing I got told through boot camp was, shut up and sit down. And the drill sergeant that I had, drill instructor that I had, his name was Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Mann.
It's a lot.
It is. It's a lot. He wasn't even the worst. The worst one I had was Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Pena Mesa. That was a lot to get out as a 19-year-old kid who just learned that I can't say the word I ever. Like, you weren't allowed to say, hey, I would like to do this. You had to be like, this recruit needs to eat. It was terrible. So Senior Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Mann came and sat down, and I was pushing hard, man. I was trying to get, this award, and he sat me down and he said, recruit, I need to tell you something. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I'm not telling you not to keep pushing. I'm not telling you to drive hard. I'm not telling you any of that. He said, but you're driving yourself to these feats.
Mm-hmm.
He said, they don't mean shit.
Right.
And I was like, what?
And I can piggyback on that. I received a bunch of awards in college or in high school.
Right.
As I was graduating, and up until that point, I was taught, hey, this is good. This, it's an award. So, man, my first resume or first job application, like when they're like, hey, you got any special skills or whatever, achievements or your certifications, whatever, bro, I put all kinds of dumb stuff I got, in the high school graduation on the thing. And I realized none of it mattered. Not the first one ever carried any additional weight. My employers did not care that I was on honor roll. They didn't care that I was in beta club for whatever however many years. They didn't care that I received a presidential award for this or that or some VFW thing or whatever. None of that mattered.
Right.
It was, are you going to be able to do the job?
Yeah.
I think so. Sounds good.
Right. We'll try you out till you fail.
And so it was a bunch of work for nothing.
Right. And so that was his thing to me was he said, look, when you get out of boot camp, and he told me, he said, you're not gonna be amazing, you're not gonna be, this top performer your whole life. Something's gonna happen somewhere. Mm-hmm. And he said, the reason I'm telling you this is I started out the same way you did. I came in, I was gung-ho, and I wanted to be the top guy. I wanted everybody to look at me and see me shine. And he said, that's not going to get you through this Marine Corps. He said, that's not going to get you through life. He said, come in, do 110% of your job. Don't try to outshine everybody. Right. He said, now look, when you go do PT and you got to run, he said, you smoke everybody out there. He said, that's all you. That's 100% your performance. He said, but when you're in there and you're doing your job every day, just do your job. Just do your job. Because if you never fail at your job, you never get in trouble. He said, and if you are the guy that shows up every day and does his job to the point that everybody goes, he's got a big mouth, but damn it, that guy does his job. Mm-hmm. He gets it done. He said, you'll be able to do whatever you need to do and make achieve the goals you have in life.
Right.
Well, now 20 years later, I'm looking at it and I'm going, what do I need to achieve? have a house, I've got kids, sure, I don't have a significant other to the realm of a 15-year marriage, but it's at a point now where it's like you that's where the lull comes in. That's where the what's next to do.
Right.
Because society and life has told me all I have to do is provide, be a dad, be a significant other of worth, not a gambler, addict or whatever, and you'll be fine. Well, where's the success in that?
Right.
We've talked about the realization at this age in our lives, and it's, you realize that we're not going in history books. The things I've done that are noteworthy in my life really only apply to people who have either been on that path themselves, but in reality, nobody cares about places I've been. Nobody cares about wars I've fought or anything like that. None of it applies today.
And I'll say that, not that I don't respect what you've done. And, being in law enforcement, a lot of the guys that we brush shoulders with day in and day out are prior military or something like that. They fall into that career. Y'all start talking about, hey, I've got this, this patch or that patch, or I've been to this school or that school or whatever. And I'm just sitting there like, bro, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like not being rude,
No,
kudos to you for
has
doing
no
it
application
at the
to
time.
you.
But it's got no application. I haven't been through it, and so.
Well, 10 years ago, me was a lot cooler than, me now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a, and I've done this to several people that we work with, when I see them with their, and I'm not going to go into all the craziness, but they say they have one badge on, and I know that I have a badge that's higher than that one.
Mm-hmm.
I make a joke and tease them that way. That's just a him and I thing. Nobody else around that circle can relate to it because they're like, man, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Right.
But it's something that I've noticed lately, especially with Veterans Day just the other day, was everybody was like, oh, you don't rank or you didn't have this. I'm like, none of that matters.
Right.
Go pay your bill at Walmart with that. Go buy your groceries with your rank. Nobody cares.
Right. Well, and that's so. I remember when I got the first agency I was at, I was promoted to sergeant. I don't even remember how old I was at the time. I was maybe 30, 32, right there. So 30, yeah, somewhere around there. And I got promoted with a guy who had spent 20 years in the Navy, and was, I think, a master chief or chief.
Something like
chief.
that.
I think it was chief. Retired as a chief. We got promoted same day, same time, same pay, same responsibilities, everything. I'm like, I feel like one of us probably has a little bit more leadership experience than the other.
Right.
Right. And yeah, it was all his achievements that he's had, prior to that didn't really weigh that much.
Correct.
But I think that's also why, as you see that over and over and over again, I think that's why you see guys, in their mid 30s, who they get an award at work. They don't like being up in the spotlight.
Right.
I don't like being in the spotlight, honestly. And this is just going to be, rather than speaking generically, I don't want people staring at me. And the reason I don't want people staring at me is because I think deep down it's got a lot to do with I don't want them to see my brokenness.
Right.
And that's where it circles back around to, we give the thing, hey, I'm fine. You stand up there, you grin it, you bear it, you take the award, and you walk away, and you're like, thank God that's over.
Right.
And it's nothing. And I will say this, it's nothing against an employer who's giving an award. Kudos to them for saying, hey, thank you for doing a great job.
Stop giving me an award. They're trying to pay raise.
Well, no, I'll say sometimes you can't.
Right. That's fair. That's fair.
So you're trying to build morale, and I get it. You're trying to say thank you. So I understand that 100%. But man, I hate being in that spotlight, and I'm not the only one. I watch. Like we had an award ceremony that I went to, and I got called up. I hated every second of it, and everybody else who got called up, you could see they hated every second of it too. I wasn't the only one.
Right.
Now, granted, I will say this, and this is where God, we are sadistic people. When I got called up, all of my friends that were there were making fun of me because they knew I didn't like it. When they got called up, we were making fun of them because we knew they didn't like it. Like, there was no mercy. Like, we didn't receive any, you didn't give any.
Right.
And so I think that part's funny or whatever. But I think it all boils down to none of us really want that we want the recognition, but we don't want to be in the spotlight for it.
You know, I think it also ties into, it's not that I don't want the recognition. This isn't the recognition I want, and this isn't from who I want it from.
That could very well be the case.
Right? So when I was married, the number one thing that made me feel the best in my marriage was when you came in, you know, you'd been working on the car in the garage, or you had finished a project, or you did whatever. Even though it was only a split second feel good, it carried me throughout when she would come through and be like, hey, that looks good. You did a good job on that. It was mowing the lawn where it's like, I know I did a good job. But in the back of my brain, I'm like, she noticed. She paid attention. That's somebody important. The guy I work with, you know, granted, the job I'm doing is, for the people I'm doing, it's a little bit different when they give me recognition because we're a smaller agency. It's a smaller group of guys, so it means a little bit more. But it shows me the difference in, I want the significant other that's going to recognize the little things I do. I don't need this big grandeur. Don't bring me a cake or anything like that. Just that, hey, thanks. That did good.
So, and this is where, you know, we're kind of spitballing here. Again, this is not scripted. This is just, you know, us throwing stuff out there to relate to guys and show that, hey, you're not alone. There was a time recently where I had to go, had to be dressed up at work, you know, and she does this every single time. I love my wife to death, but sometimes if I could legally get away with it, I just want to strangle her. And it's not for her being mean. All right. I'm dressed up the other day, right? I had an event at work. And so I'm wearing the Class A uniform.
Full deck. Yeah.
Badges shined up, name tag shined up, you know.
Looking crisp.
Oh, look, the shirt's looking good. The pants have a nice little
crease in them.
Boots are shined up, looking, you know. Granted, I didn't shine them as much as I could. Used to, I'd shine them where it was like a mirror. Now I was like, that's good enough.
Right.
But I'm looking good, like sharp enough to cut through concrete, right? And
that's a nice saying. I like that.
You like that?
I did. That was good.
So I get out and I'm by my unit, and Brittany comes walking up, and she goes, "Oh, look at you looking all good," and I'm shut up. I walked away.
Like he's a little bit embarrassed, but you're like,
a little bit embarrassed. I'm like, I still got it.
Right.
You know what they call it, Riz or whatever? No, I ain't got none of that. But I had my hair done, beard trimmed up, and everything, and I know, like I was feeling good, I was looking good until she's like, "Ooh, look at you," and she just embarrassed me. But it was the same thing. Like my dad had me go to an event with him a couple months ago, and it was like a charity event type thing or whatever, and it was he said it was black tie, and so he calls me. I want to say the day of, hey, you want to go to this thing tonight? I'm like, well, I guess so.
Oh, I remember
what
that.
I need to wear, you know, and so I go through scrambling. I go get some slacks out of the closet or whatever. I ain't warm, and since I had a job interview,
right.
Had a blazer that I've worn 1,000 times. Start throwing everything together, put a little bow tie on, do my hair and all this other stuff.
You and your bow ties.
And I'm talking about I'm might as well be James Bond coming out of the back room or whatever, like just looking, or feeling good or whatever. And she does that. She goes, "Oh boy, you better stop it." It's one of the things where, even then I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
But
because we're not used
funny.
to it.
Yeah. She doesn't do that all the time.
Right.
Somehow when I'm wearing the holy blue jeans and a raggedy shirt, that's
right, you ain't got it.
No, she ain't interested in me at all.
Right. But see, that's what I'm saying is it's for us when you stop complimenting that significant other. When she does her hair different, or she does something a little different with her outfit or whatever, and you don't notice, all of a sudden we're a bad guy.
You notice they cut 1/4 of an inch off their hair?
Right.
Like I go to get a haircut, my head looks completely different.
100% different. I look like I showered with holy water. Right. Like when I get a haircut, like you're not gonna notice anything else. Like 1/4 inch off my hair. Man, I think my barber would laugh at me. But on the flip side of it, when you get down to it, nobody ever comes by outside of your male heterosexual friends. nobody comes by and goes, "Oh, you looking good today." Because I know we do it. I know we do it all the time. And it makes me laugh that you and I will go back and forth, or we'll mess with somebody else. It just back and forth about, teetering that line. But the minute your wife is like, "How you doing?" You're like, "Ooh, stop it. Stop. I'm exposed." It's like, it's funny to me because that's where we want those compliments to come from. But we're so unused to getting them that we don't know how to react to it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I know when I look at a significant other and I'm like, "You look good today. You do something different." Like, I know where my brain is at. So when we get it back, you don't know where their brain is at. You know what I mean? Like, we are, as men, the way that society has built us and around us, we're occasions.
Right.
We're not daily observations. And I know that this sounds a little confusing at first, but if you look at the way that society has structured women, okay, as far as like we recognize them on Valentine's Day, we recognize them on their birthdays, we make sure Christmas is good for them, we make sure that Mother's Day comes through, because God help you if you didn't come through on Mother's Day. Father's Day, we're getting socks, maybe a tool, maybe a tie.
Well, and so I think that's more of a generalized thing, because I will say this: my wife does really good, even though I've been kind of mean to her in the past.
Right.
She's hit all those.
Right, right.
She'll hit all the things, and she does a good job of making me feel wanted.
Right.
I will give her that.
But look at society as to how they do it. Right. Like, what do you remember every gift you ever got your dad for Father's Day, or how big of a deal it was?
I haven't got him a lot.
Right. So I can tell you right now that the number 2 way that I knew that my marriage was over was when she forgot my birthday. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, forgot the whole day, like the whole birthday. And it was like, I don't really jump to celebrate my birthday. It's just not something that I'm overly pleased with. It's not even the fact that it's another birthday, whatever. It's just that in my life, bad things have always happened on my birthday. Being in combat, it's gonna happen. But it's not something that I go about. It's not on my Facebook profile. I make fun of my dad because I'm his only son, and he doesn't know when my birthday is. Love him to death. He knows it's at the end of a month. Like, that's where he's at. But forgets the whole birthday. Her birthday, we had a treasure hunt. We had a treasure box. We had a 3-foot by 4-foot card.
Right.
Like, whole 9. Kids were in on it. Like, it was a big deal. Father's Day wasn't. It was overlooked. Father's Day, I got told Happy Father's Day 3 days late. And then my birthday came around, which is shortly after. And I'm like halfway through getting ready for work. And I just kind of looked over and was like, all right, well, I'm going to go to work. You guys have a great birthday. That's how I left it. So I was like, you going to forget the whole day. I mean,
Right.
Might as well tell you happy birthday since it's not my birthday. And that was like one of the phases where I was like, this is done. Like, how do you forget somebody's birthday? Right. And that's where it put me in the tailspin of I'm going to be lost because I know what I have to do. I know that this is coming to an end, and I know that I've got to redirect myself. And I don't even think that she realized that I had already checked out at that point, which is from life experience that I knew that I'm going to have to make a lot of changes. And in doing that, I'm going to disrupt my autopilot.
Right.
And that's what brought me out of that. It was like, everybody looks at divorces and everything else as a bad thing. And I'm not sitting here saying that my divorce was, a cakewalk. Right. It had its ups and downs, but it's a realization that it's the little things of attention and notice and somebody just going, your presence matters to me enough for me to remember these specific details. I'm just staring at him like, how are you laying like that, bro? But it's those things that put us in that comfort zone.
Right.
And when we stop getting them and it gets uncomfortable, that's when we get into that scary place where it's like, it's not dangerous for the world. Right. It's dangerous for us.
Right.
Because you realize in those moments I'm alone, and it's mostly my fault.
Right.
It's not I'm not a victim of anybody but myself, and that's the biggest thing is that we're not victims.
Right.
We
And that's what a lot of social media posts make us out to be. Oh,
right,
nobody
right.
ever asks, when's the last time you asked your boyfriend, how he felt or whatever. Well, nobody ever does. Okay, and while I get that's a
True statement.
true statement, the guy's not a victim in that.
Right.
Because also he doesn't share his stuff.
Two-way
And
street.
And this is for the listeners, you can't complain that nobody ever asks you, what's going on or how you doing. If when they do ask you what's going on and how you doing,
Right.
you don't link up with them.
Right.
Hey, I'm good, man, and then roll out or
Right.
change the subject to talk about Minecraft or whatever it
Right.
is.
And look for the significant other listeners, and that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to genderize it. For our significant others that listen, and regardless of what side of that spectrum you're on, you've got to remember, no matter who that person is to you, whether they're a significant other, whether they're a friend, whatever, the moment you weaponize that openness, you've done the lowest thing you could ever
Right.
do. You've
Well,
damaged them to a
and we
point they
see
can't
that
come
a lot,
back.
And that's just because of our profession. We get called to a lot of people's houses. They're going
Right,
whether
right.
it's they're on the brink of divorce or they're going through divorce, and adults can be downright nasty
Oh,
to each
ruthless.
other, to
Ruthless.
the people they had the beach weddings with. That hey, we're
Right.
pledging our life together.
Right.
And you look and you're like, how did you go from hey, this is a person I want to spend my life
Yeah.
with, this is my soulmate, to I hope they die.
Right, right.
And like I don't understand it, and I haven't been through that, so I'm only speaking on the outside, but it's across the board,
Yeah.
and so I see, and I'm not saying all husbands are bad, I'm not saying all wives are bad, in the divorces, but at times like that, that's when it gets weaponized. So it's
So
hey,
quickly,
Hey,
yeah.
you opened up about this, or you talked about this story or that story or whatever, and it turns around and gets thrown in your face, or
Right.
it gets thrown onto Facebook.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
and so now the guy's got to deal with that, or even when guys are crappy, the wives have got to deal with it. Having to explain to their friends that hey, they had a psychotic episode or whatever,
Right.
because they were stressed out and they made statements and they tried to keep it under wraps because you don't want your neighbors knowing what's going on. You don't want
Oh, yeah,
all
yeah.
you don't want all of your friends to know everything that's going on in your life. I get that. That's human nature.
Right.
But it gets thrown out so blatantly without regard because you're like, hey, I'm done with you. So now I'm just going to throw it out there and
Right.
you deal with it. I hope your life is horrible.
Right.
And I'm like, how does that work?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I just don't understand it. But then at the same time, what I noticed, I don't have the same conversations with my wife that I have with you.
Right.
Or that I have with Luke, one of my other really, really, really good friends, where like I know that, and I don't have the same conversations between you two,
Right.
And so like I'll call him, or honestly he calls me a lot of the time, and he's like, hey man, what's where you at, what do you got going on, because he knows everything that's going on in my life, and I'll have moments with him where it might be 2 a.m, sitting in the recliner crying over on the phone or whatever, and I'm not going to have that with. I just don't do it with my wife, and it's not
Right.
It's not that I don't value her opinion or whatever, but I also don't want her to look at me as being weak, and that's a standard guy approach to things.
Right.
Well,
and we've also tied that connection in too, that it's walks of life.
Right.
And I can respect where Luke comes from. He's a very respected individual, and I know that he's a member of your church and everything else like that. Whereas I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the. I say this respectfully to Mr. Luke. Luke's not the guy you call at 2 a.m. to get rid of something that you should get rid of.
Right.
Right. I am. Like, my truck or yours.
Right.
I got shovels. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's where we've gotten to the point of maturity in our lives. And I'm not going to say we're very mature, but we're mature enough to know that there are things that we can address with each other,
Mm-hmm.
and the nitty gritty of life. And there's things that need a different touch that Luke's going to have based on our paths in life. And my son, I love him to death. He's 8 years old, and he tells me all the time, whenever he gets angry about stuff, and I tell him to sit down, calm down, like, don't get angry. There's no reason to get angry, and he says, well, well, I'm just so mad I want to fight. And I'm like, no, you don't. I promise, no, you don't. And he's like, no, you don't understand, Dad. I get so angry. I want to explode. And I'm like, okay, that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. I was like, but you got to remember, every time you explode, you have no idea what's on the other side of that explosion and how big their explosion is going to be.
Consequences.
Right.
You know?
And so, we've had the self-defense. We've had the, when it's okay to be angry and when it's okay to use force and not use force and everything else. And I realized this morning, having a conversation, because he's getting agitated with his little sister, like most big brothers do. And I looked at him and I said, babe, you don't want to go through the life like Daddy did. You don't want to know the majority of your adult life, all you've done is fight. That's it. And I'm not glorifying anything. I'm not saying that, all I did was operator level stuff or anything stupid like that.
Right.
But my whole life has been geared around violence of action.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have to turn that off in those time frames to go with a softer touch to be husband or father, that's difficult. Then when you get to a point in life like we are now where it's like, I don't need that guy anymore.
Right.
He's still here, but I don't need him. I need a softer approach to everything. And again, it ties us back into that lull and autopilot mode, because everything we've done, for the last 39 years, none of it matters.
Right.
Absolutely none of it matters. And to get myself out of that mentality is like this podcast, because of every hardship and tough road and mountain we've climbed and everything that we've gone through in our lives to this point now, because you and I live very different lives.
Right.
You were a high school honor roll guy. You went to college. You got degrees. You've worked hard, business owner. Successful marriage, everything else. And I'm the total opposite. Where it's like I barely passed high school, not because I'm an idiot,
Right.
because I didn't care. Had to join the military, and from the military had to fight my way through that, and then no successful marriages, kids out the wazoo, and divorces and child support and all this other trash. And not that marriage or anything that's trash, that's a common term in the military, my bad. But when we get to this point in our life where we go, we struggled through all of that. We made it to here. What's next? Because I've retired. I'm retired from the military, and I do law enforcement now because, number one, retirement's not enough. Thanks. Oh, that's terrible. I can't do politics. My bad.
We're not doing politics.
So the retirement check's not enough to cover the lifestyle that I built for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I work because I enjoy this type of work. I enjoy helping people. What's next?
Right.
My grandfather had 5 retirements because the dude couldn't stop working.
Right.
You know,
Well, I think so many times, like we run into, especially the mid-30s age group, and I'm not,
yeah.
I'm not linking it just to that age group, because you got guys who are in their 20s that experience it, guys
Yeah.
who are in their 40s, 50s, on up, and like we've talked, like there was read an article where this guy, he's 31 years old, he's a police officer. And he took his own life. He had a wife, he had 2 kids, 2 very young kids. And so all the innocence and the excitement that they bring. I think he was in Boy Scout, or he assisted with Boy Scouts.
Right.
I think he was a coach, and like all these things where like this guy's giving back. He's got his career, he's got a great family, and all this other stuff, and he takes his own life. And you're like, why? What brings him that? And then you follow up with, hey, there's another one where guy's 26 years old. Does the same thing, and we look at all the different guys that, or not even just guys, but people that we've been there where, hey, they're getting carried out of the house.
Yeah.
And it's all across age groups. But what's
the catalyst?
What's the catalyst to go from from where they are now, where or from listeners now, where hey they're feeling numb, they're feeling like hey things like they're broken.
Yeah.
They tell all their friends they're fine, but honestly they're broken. How do you make that jump, and how do you prevent that jump?
I think you got to figure out how to pull yourself out of the self-pity zone.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
you
that's
know,
one, and I think that's been the reason why we took the approach of, hey, you're not a victim.
no, you're not.
You're not a victim. You have to, start picking up on what you've got going on in
Right.
your life.
And I always go back to when you lost your job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things that I love about the communication that we have is there are things. These telemarketers are getting ridiculous today.
Mm-hmm.
Where's Epps? Where's Epps, Louisiana? Do you know?
I don't know. Anyway.
Exactly.
What
That's
you were
I know
saying.
that's a telemarketer.
What you were saying.
So when you went in and you told her,
Mm-hmm.
and she found out that you lost your job,
Right.
and she tells you, you take today, but tomorrow you get going
Right.
and get yourself back in gear. And I use that now as when I have a setback, regardless of what it is. I'm going to take today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to self-pity it. I'm going to do what I got to do to mope about it. But tomorrow I've got to do something. Because if we sit there, and that's a massive takeaway, especially at how old you guys were at that time,
Right.
for her to say, hey, take today. But tomorrow, we need to adjust this, and we need to correct this issue so that we can continue on the path that we're on. It's not a death in the family. It's not, something that you need to spend a long period of time mourning over. It's something you go, damn, and then move on from it.
Right.
And that's one of the things that dudes, we struggle with this.
Well,
the knowing when to suck it up and move on,
Right.
and when to rip the Band-Aid off, rub the mud in it, whatever.
Well, I think a lot of it is we don't take and we don't process our emotions and our traumas. All right, and
No.
what I mean by that is, you talk to guys. Like we talked about in the very first episode, Welcome to the Shit Show. If you haven't watched that, go back and watch that.
Right.
But you talk to a bunch of the guys prior to doing this. Hey, if you do you need to talk to anybody or whatever your questions were with that. Nobody ever wants to pay for
Therapy, right.
for therapy.
Right.
And I get it because, hey, we got money to throw, or we got to throw our money at bills or, life expenses and things like that. And the thing that you run into is when you finally do start talking, it's like, okay, my life isn't that bad because you got, Jimbo down the road, takes in, his wife left him or, family, member was in a car wreck or whatever and didn't make
Right,
it or
right.
whatever. Like we judge our experiences on what everybody else has got going on. So we like, okay, I'm better than this guy, but I'm not better than I'm somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And somehow that makes it seem like like we don't have to worry about what we've got going on, and so we push it down, and that's where you get the numb thing because you never learned how to process your feelings.
Right.
Well, at the same scenario, if I walk by and you got 6 people in a line and I poke them all with a pencil in their arm, and cause a little bit of an injury to them or whatever, the injury still happened. It doesn't
Right.
matter how many times
Right.
the
It's
other
still
person
present.
got hit, you still
Right.
have the injury there.
Right.
And so we take and we ignore things. You don't discuss it with anybody, and so it builds up, and that's what makes you numb. That's what makes it where you're like, okay, nobody cares. Well, nobody cares because you're not saying anything about it,
Right.
because you're not valuing the fact you've still got to process this. And so I think that's kind of the driving force there. That hey, we've got to break out of is is one, you're not a victim, but two, you've got to find a way to acknowledge, hey, this is a problem area.
Right. The
And
appropriate response to the trauma.
Right.
Your kid skins their knee. You need to go clean it and put a Band-Aid on it.
Right.
It's the same thing with things we go through.
Right.
The
You can't
same.
ignore it.
Right. And this isn't just a first responder, law enforcement, military thing.
Mm-hmm.
There is a serious crisis in the world for men. We don't know how to address our traumas, our injuries, and we end up taking that trauma, allowing it to affect us negatively, and carrying it into every single relationship that we form, whether it's romantic,
Right.
friend, associate, family member, whatever. We transfer all of that across the board because we've never stopped long enough to look in the mirror and go, I'm not okay.
Right.
And I need to reach out to somebody. And look, I'm a big proprietor of if you can't trust your circle, number one, you need to circle, but number two, seek that help. There are there are resources available for if your insurance won't cover mental health. They have through the state different resources for you to obtain mental health. I'm going to caveat that and say you're going to get what you pay for. Plain and simple. You
Well, so yes and no. All right, and I get where you're going with that.
Right.
A lot of health insurance policies offer some type of coverage there too.
Right.
And so you got to do your vetting. You know, you got to find the right person. And I'm saying this from somebody who I've been to therapists that were great, or I've been to a therapist that's great. And I've been to therapists that were absolutely horrible that made me never want to talk to somebody else again.
110% with you.
So you've got both ends of the spectrum. In the same way, you've got a mechanic who's great. You got a mechanic who's horrible.
Yep.
You know, we all know doctors. We know doctors who is like, if I break my arm, I do not want to go over here.
Yeah.
Got other ones where you're like, hey, no, I don't mind going. So in the same sense, you got to do the vetting or whatever, and you don't want to go talk to a doctor who specializes in minor thing, or a psychiatrist who specializes in minor things when you got something major going on, and vice versa. So you got to do your vetting there, but if you can't afford it, there's still a lot of options. I think 988 doesn't charge you anything.
No, correct. And granted, that's a temporary, that's a Band-Aid.
Right.
Let's I mean, and I'm not knocking it at all. It's a great resource, but that's a Band-Aid until you can get help.
Right.
That's just you're not going to build a relationship there. And that's the biggest key thing that we're trying to get out here is that you've got to build trust in somebody. And the pets are okay. The dogs, the cats, and everything else.
Right.
Those are great. It's a great stress reliever. I can tell you right now, like the 30 seconds I pet that big dummy's floppy ears all over the place, it's a great release of emotion or whatever, because I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm petting this big floppy dog. At the same time, who's in heaven, by the way, because he's never allowed in this room. He's passed out on this road. Right. In the same breath, though, that you're putting Band-Aids on the problem, you have to find somebody that you can build a trusting relationship with, that you can open up that door, because we're always going to have things in the back of our mind, our deep, dark secret that we don't tell anybody. We're always going to have them. We're always going to have that piece of trauma that we don't release to anybody. There's nothing we can do about it. That's something that you've got to have utter trust to let that out the door. But you've got to let it off your chest. You cannot, no matter what society says, no matter what the stigmas say, no matter how long they've told us this, we are incapable of carrying the weight of the world. You might be able to get away for a while with it. You may be able to handle it for a while, but eventually that weight crushes you.
Right.
And we get to that point that we're 80, 90 years old. I don't plan to live that long, but some men get to that point where they're 80, 90 years old, and it's like you look back and you go, what have I wasted my life on when I should have been paying attention to the things that matter?
Who did you push away?
Right.
Who did you push away? Because that, in the same sense where we're like, hey, look, you got this going on. There's nothing wrong with contacting a therapist and getting some help. And I'm a firm believer of using that, of using a therapist when you can. At the same in the same breath, friends are every bit as much important and a requirement. And because as much as you may love your therapist, you can't call them all
at 2
the time
o'clock
at
in
2
the
o'clock in the morning.
Right. When you need that moment.
When you're sitting there and you're 2 Jack and Cokes in for the night, and all of a sudden the demons that you thought you had boxed away are like, hey man, what's going on?
Remember that time?
They're sitting on the couch with you, and you're like, I got nowhere to go but right here,
Right.
And you got to sit there and try to work through it. You've got to be able to have that friend who is going to answer that phone, And that's not an easy thing to do. In the same regards, where hey, you got to vet, different,
Right.
doctors and mechanics and all this other stuff. You've got to vet friends, or you got to vet people to say, hey, who's going to be that person for me?
Right.
And also you got to realize you may be that person for one of them.
That's
because
well,
again,
that's,
we don't know what
that's where I was going
is
to go
going
with
on in
that.
each other's brains.
If somebody's going to open that door for you and you're going to weigh on them, you've got to be able to reciprocate it and carry the weight for them every now and then. It's very similar to a romantic relationship in the sense that everybody always goes into it with, this is 50-50. No, it ain't.
Yeah.
It ain't. Because there's going to be times in your relationship and there's going to be times in your friendship where you're carrying the weight. You've got to know when to draw the line. We're not saying, be the weight carrier the whole time, because now you're carrying your world and their world. But be reciprocant of what's going on, but cognizant at the same time. Obviously, don't trust the guy who everybody at work knows is running around telling everybody. Don't trust the guy in the circle that sits here and drinks coffee with you, then goes across the street to your arch nemesis and sits and has coffee with him. You know what I mean? But at the same time, if we're not opening up these doors, we're slowly swallowing ourselves, and by the time it's too late. You've checked out because you just didn't take 2 seconds to open up a door, and we're gonna fail. It's a thing in life. We're gonna fail at something. We're gonna fail a lot, and I talk about it all the time. I suck at a lot of things. Being a dad, not one of them. Really good. I'm present. But I also know that I'm not present for every single one of my children. Mm-hmm. Not every single one of my children calls me when there's a problem. So I know, I'm not going to say I suck, but I definitely could do better.
Shortcomings.
Right. So look at that when you're looking for those avenues, because when we get into the lull where nothing's really wrong, I just feel broken, that's when you need to start looking for your way out. Right. Your light at the end of the tunnel, and not every friend that you have that's a lifeline in that moment. I know your face went confused when I said light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, we're not going that route.
We're not the checkout, the handout, the life preserver, the guy that gets tossed to you. All right, but understand that not every. Yeah, we're not getting canceled, not yet. Not every hand that comes out is going to be the same hand every time. There's going to be moments like with Mike here. If there's times where he's going to say, hey, John, you got a minute. And there's times he's going to say, hey, Luke, you got a minute. Because different problems have different solutions.
Right.
Sometimes you need a hammer, and sometimes you need a scalpel. And that's how you've got to approach your problems and know when to call for a hammer and when to call for a scalpel.
Right.
Also, if you don't know, I'm the hammer. Luke's the scalpel.
So, guys, I want to say thank y'all for taking a moment to listen to this podcast. I do want to stress, if you are experiencing any type of depressing thought or thoughts of wanting to harm yourself or somebody else, call 988.
Please.
We definitely do not want to get phone calls. We don't want to get those emails saying that a bad decision was made. We'd rather get emails from you at Coffee&theBull saying what's going on. If you don't like it, if you're like, hey, I don't like the way John talks, send us an email.
Always me.
Coffee&theBull@yahoo.com. We'd love to hear from you.
If you don't like that Mike doesn't wear socks because he's gross.
Yeah, I don't wear socks if I can help it.
That's valid. He doesn't. It's weird.
But guys, take a moment. If you haven't done so on all the platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify,
yes.
TikTok, Instagram. There, nearly everything out there we're on. Find us, hit those subscribe buttons. Let us know that you're following.
It's the best way for us to get it out there to maybe not necessarily you. Maybe everything in your life is going great right now, but you may have somebody in your circle of friends who's afraid to open up, and this may be a way for us to get out to them and let them know the biggest message of all is that you're not alone. That there's nothing that you're going to go through and nothing that you haven't gone through that either Mike or I haven't already experienced. And I'm going to tell you right now, you hit us up with coffeeandthebull@yahoo.com with whatever you're going through or whatever problem, concern you have. And I'll be honest with you, if there's a circumstance that you're going through that Mike hasn't experienced or I haven't experienced, we'll find the guy that has.
That can help out.
We will get him on to the show. If it's something you want to keep private, we'll get a conversation going. If you do reach out, Mike and I are on this 24/7. I'm not saying you're going to get a response 24/7 because we do sleep as much as we talk about not enough sleep, but we're going to get back to you. We love hearing from the people. The messages have started to pick up. So far, nothing but great feedback, which is disappointing because Mike wants a hater moment.
Yeah,
But all that being said, it's the goal is to make a difference somewhere. It's not millionaire status type things that we're going after. It's nothing like that. It's we're just trying to normalize that we're human beings and we have emotions, and not saying it's okay to boohoo cry in the middle of a gunfight, but at some point we gotta address the injury and treat it and get better so that we can be better for the people that we care about in our lives. So all that being said, Mike's gonna say his stupid catchphrase. I'm gonna call him stupid, and we're gonna see you guys later.
Toodaloo.
Stupid.